My name is Anesu Masunda. I'm presenting a topic on perspectives of psychology, question number 10 of the SAG Access to Higher Education Diploma in Nursing. Perspectives in psychology. Different approaches or perspectives are used in psychology to try and understand how people think and act. These points of view give us a different ways to think about how people think, feel, and act. Some of the most important schools of thought are the cognitive and behavioral. The cognitive perspective says that the mind is like a computer that processes information and focuses on things like perception, memory, and problem solving. The behavioral view, on the other hand, looks at behavior that can be seen and how it is affected by things in the environment. It focuses on learning through conditioning. This talk will look into these 2 points of view by explaining their main ideas, judging the work of the famous theorists, listing their similarities and differences, and talking about how they relate to current psychological problems. According to Jean Piaget, some of the most important things that Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget looked into were how people learn and grow. His theory says that there are 4 stages that all children go through in their cognitive development: sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational. It was important to Piaget that children learn by interacting with the world around them. This changes the way we think through assimilation and accommodation. From his point of view, cognitive development is mostly about how people think, how people feel about it. And as kids get older, their thinking gets more complicated. Piaget's research had a big impact on educational psychology because it helped people see learning as a process of improving kids' reasoning skills over time. This leads to better abstract thinking and the ability to deal with hypothetical problems as a teen. This is according to McLeod 2025. We move on to the strengths and limitations of the work of Jean Piaget. The stage-based framework that Jean Piaget offered revolutionized our understanding of child development and is an important part of his work, because it is so strongly demonstrates how children actively construct knowledge, moving from tangible sensory experience to more abstract, logical thinking. His notion has had a lasting and substantial impact on pedagogical practices. Nevertheless, Piaget's theory may fail to fully account for the impact of social and cultural factors on cognitive development, offering a somewhat universal perspective that fails to take into consideration all contextual variables. That is according to McLeod 2025. Subsequent research has also shown that children can acquire specific cognitive abilities before his stages suggest. Albert Bandura was a social learning theorist that came up with which combines thinking and acting, was a big step forward of cognitive psychology. Bandura said that people learn not only by doing things themselves, but also by watching other people do and how it turns out. This is called observational learning. He discussed the self-efficacy, modeling, and imitation, as well as the impact of motivation, attention, and memory on the learning process. Bandura's research combined behaviorism and cognitive psychology by demonstrating the importance of mental states in understanding how people learn new behaviors. The well-known tests he conducted with the Bobo doll demonstrated that when children are angry, they behave like adults. That is according to Bandura, 1969. He stated that this demonstrated the importance of social context in learning. There are strengths and limitations of the work of Albert Bandura as well. By including important cognitive processes such as attention, motivation, and self-efficacy, Albert Bandura's social learning theory successfully bridges the gap between behaviorism and cognitive psychology. His groundbreaking work with the Bobo doll illustrated a significance of one's social environment in the learning process. The theory has certain limitations, one of which is that it does not explain everything when it comes to the role of intrinsic and biological elements play in shaping behavior and learning. In addition, while it explains how learned actions might be executed, it provides a less thorough description of the mental operations needed to first acquire complicated new activities that go beyond limitation. That's according to Bandura 1969, Nelson and Vinson 2025. We have the key cognitive theorist assumptions as follows. Understanding behavior cognitively entails being aware of how your mind works on the inside. According to this theory, the mind functions similarly to a computer. It receives sensory information, processes through memory, perception, and reasoning, and then applies what it has learned. Cognitive psychologists believe that people solve problems by changing their thinking and decision-making processes. This viewpoint holds that while mental processes cannot be directly observed, they can be scientifically studied by developing conclusions and theories that explain thought and behavior in a testable manner. That is according to McLeod 2025. Key behaviorist theorists, we have John B. Watson. People think that John B. Watson was the founder of behaviorism. He said that psychology should only study behavior that can be seen and not unmeasurable mental states inside people. This would be a psychology more objective from the scientific point of view. Watson posited that all behavior were acquired through environmental conditioning, particularly classical conditioning. His famous Little Albert experiment, in which he made the child afraid of a white rat, showed this. Watson opposed psychoanalytic ideas by focusing on the link between stimuli and response. He turned the psychology into a scientific field that studies how outside factors affect the behavior. That is according to Watson, 1913. However, John Watson's theory has got strengths and weaknesses as well. One of John B. Watson's greatest contribution was to elevate psychology to the level of science by requiring the examination of measurable behavior, by showing that people might acquire emotions via associating them with their surroundings. His Little Albert experiment presented strong empirical support for classical conditioning. Because of its strong environmental determinism, Watson's method fails to take into account the ways in which a person's biology, genetics, and mental states impact their conduct. That is according to Watson, 1913, and Cherry, 2023. B.F. Skinner, who was also a psychologist, who added to the behaviorism the idea of operant conditioning, which looks at how actions have results that change people's decisions about what to do. People who are rewarded for behaviors are more likely to do them again, while people who are punished are less likely to do them again. The operant chamber, also known as the Skinner box, was used by him to study how animals learn complicated behaviors by getting treats at certain times. Skinner's focus on reinforcement changed how techniques for changing behavior were used, which had an impact on both therapy and education. He didn't agree with the mental explanations from the inside. He believed that actions and how they changed the environment were the only ways to fully understand behavior. That is according to Skinner, 1938. However, it has got strengths and weaknesses as well. One of the main strengths of B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning theory is the robust and applicable framework it offers for studying and shaping behavior in response to its outcomes. His discoveries have been implemented effectively in therapy, education, and organizational management. They are highly repeatable and were obtained via vigorous and experimental method. The fundamental flaw in Skinner's extreme behaviorism is that it completely disregards the significance of intrinsic tendencies and internal mental operations, such as emotions, ideas, and drives, as according to Skinner, 1938, and Cherry, 2023. We also have key behaviorist theory assumptions as follows. The behavioral view is based on the idea of that everything we do is learned by interacting with our surroundings. It says that psychology should only study behavior that can be seen and not think about how people are feeling, because that's not scientific. Behaviorists believe that behavior is controlled by two types of conditioning: classical conditioning, which involves linking stimuli together, was created by Ivan Pavlov, and operant conditioning, which involves learning from results, was created by B.F. Skinner. This way of thinking says that behavior is mostly caused by environmental cause and conditions for getting rewards. This makes it possible to study behaviors, causes, and changes in a scientific way. That's according to Skinner, 1938, Pavlov, 1927, Cherry, 2023. An evaluation of the work of the theories relating to each of the identified psychological perspectives. Evaluation of cognitive theories. Jean Piaget transformed cognitive psychology by proposing that children go through 4 distinctive stages: sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational, each marked by qualitative changes in cognitive processes. His findings highlighted the importance of biological maturation and experimental learning in cognitive development, by importance of showing how children actively construct knowledge through their interactions with their surroundings. Although some argue that Piaget's theory is too rigid in its stages and ignores children's abilities, it has had significant impact on developing psychology and education. He became an important person in the cognitive perspective because he focused on epistemological development, which has set the stage for later cognitive research, according to MacLeod, 2025, and PubChem, 2022. An evaluation on cognitive theories. Albert Bandura extended cognitive theory by integrating social context with cognitive process in his social learning theory. He emphasized observational learning, modeling, and self-efficacy, showing that people learn not only through direct experience, but by watching others. Bandura introduced crucial cognitive mediators like attention and motivation within learning, bridging behavior and cognition. His work, especially the Bobodo experiment, showed how mental states affect how we learn to behave. This greatly expanded cognitive psychology and has practical applications in theory and education. In education, according to Bandura 1969, Nison and Verson 2025. John B. Watson was the first to study behaviorism. He thought that the scientific method should only look at the behavior and not let people think about themselves. He conducted experiments such as Little Albert to demonstrate the emotional response, that emotional response are trainable, indicating that environmental factors can influence behavior. Watson's research pushed psychology towards more rigorous empirical methods. This made behaviorism the most popular way of thinking about psychology in the 20th century. That's why B.F. Skinner came up with the operant conditioning, a way to show how reward and punishments can change behavior. He used the Skinner box to show that you can choose to change how often things happen. This changes how we teach and treat other people in a big way. Skinner 1938 and Cherry 2023 both say that behaviorism is a scientific theory that can be used to change people's behavior. Skinner emphasized the study of behavior that can be seen and rejected mentalistic explanations and analysis of the similarities and differences between the two perspectives in psychology. Both the cognitive and behavioral perspectives believe that best way to understand human behavior is through scientific methods and real-world research. They stress that experience is very important in shaping behavior and support using intervention strategies to change harmful behaviors or thoughts. Both points of view want to make people's lives better by creating therapies and change people's behavior. Also, they don't like approaches that are only guesswork or self-reflection. Instead, they like outcomes that can be seen or measured. Cognitive behavior therapy, CBT, is one example of the treatment uses both cognitive and behavioral approaches. It works to improve mental health by changing both dysfunctional ways of thinking and acting. This is according to the American Psychology Association 2025. According to the cognitive perspective, our behavior is primarily determined by our mental processes, such as thinking, remembering, and problem solving. Its purpose to examine people's experiences and the mental processes that enable them to act. In contrast, the behavioral perspective focuses solely on the visible behaviors and environmental factors. It does not believe in the mental states within the mind of the to be important or real. According to the behaviorism, we can understand behavior by applying conditioning concepts such as rewards and punishment. However, cognitive psychology studies how information is processed in order to understand why people behave the way they do. This difference influences how they start and practice therapy. Cognitive approaches try to change the way people think, while behavioral approaches try to change how people act. Treating anxiety and disorders in care settings. In care settings, cognitive behaviorism therapy commonly applied to treat anxiety disorders. Cognitive theory guides through they teach coping skills and problem solving. Thank you.